Day after day, Thomas Valero noticed the subtle signs of distress in his daughter's demeanor when she returned from school. Her downcast eyes and trembling lips spoke volumes about the pain she was experiencing, yet she seemed hesitant to share her troubles. Determined to uncover the truth, Thomas began a careful investigation, listening intently and observing closely. When he finally discovered the source of her anguish, the revelation shocked him to his core. Faced with a difficult situation, Thomas realized that sometimes protecting one's child requires extraordinary measures, even if those measures might skirt the edges of conventional propriety. Starting school is a significant milestone for any child, fraught with challenges that can overwhelm even the most resilient young learner. For Thomas Valero's daughter, the transition to kindergarten at Pine Grove Elementary quickly became a nightmare. Before starting school, she had been a vibrant, outgoing child, creative, friendly, and eager to learn. But something changed dramatically after she began attending kindergarten. The transformation was stark and troubling. Where once there was excitement, now there were tears. Mornings became a battlefield of emotions, with his daughter begging to stay home, her terror palpable and growing with each passing day. At first, Thomas attributed her distress to typical new school jitters. Children often struggle with change after all. But as weeks turned into months, her anxiety only intensified. She withdrew, her once cheerful demeanor replaced by constant emotional turmoil. Her grades began to slip, and the positive feedback reports became a distant memory. Despite his best efforts to communicate, his daughter remained silent, refusing to reveal the source of her pain. This wall of silence only heightened Thomas's concern. Something was clearly wrong, but he was unable to pinpoint the exact cause. Thomas knew he couldn't continue watching his child suffer. The happy, confident girl he knew was disappearing before his eyes, replaced by a shell of fear and anxiety. He was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The breaking point had arrived, and Thomas was ready to do whatever necessary to protect his daughter and understand the source of her profound distress. Parental instinct is a powerful force, and for Thomas Valero it was driving him to uncover the truth behind his daughter's mounting unhappiness. The once vibrant little girl had become a shadow of herself, withdrawing further with each passing day. Thomas and his wife had always been dedicated to creating a nurturing home environment, raising their children with love, encouragement, and a strong sense of self-worth. Now, something was threatening to unravel everything they had built. The formative years are critical, Thomas knew. What happens during childhood can shape a person's entire future. His daughter was experiencing something profound, something that was slowly chipping away at her confidence and joy. Traditional methods of investigation had failed. She was too young, too shy to articulate her pain, leaving Thomas feeling increasingly desperate and helpless. Conventional approaches would not work. If he simply asked to observe the classroom, the teacher would undoubtedly modify her behavior. He needed concrete evidence, a way to understand exactly what was happening during those crucial school hours when his daughter was most vulnerable. After careful deliberation, Thomas devised an unconventional plan. It was drastic, perhaps even ethically questionable, but he was beyond conventional solutions. He would create a small listening device, something so tiny it could be hidden in his daughter's hair without detection. This would allow him to hear firsthand what was occurring in her classroom, to capture the unfiltered reality of her daily experience. He knew the risks, he knew the potential breach of trust, but watching his daughter's spirit slowly diminish was no longer an option. Thomas was determined to protect her, to understand the source of her pain, no matter the cost. The moment Thomas's daughter ran up the driveway, he felt a mix of anticipation and dread. The hidden recording device would finally reveal the truth behind her recent transformation. As he began to listen, the reality of what had been happening in her classroom unfolded, and it was far worse than he could have imagined. The teacher's voice crackled through the recording, laden with anger and contempt. Thomas listened in horror as Mrs. Duncan berated her young students, her tone cutting and cruel. Each harsh word, each unnecessary scream exposed a systematic emotional assault on children who should have been nurtured, not terrorized. This was the source of his daughter's pain, a teacher who saw her position of authority as a license to demean and destroy. Determined to seek justice, Thomas first approached the school district. He presented his evidence meticulously, expecting immediate action, but the response was infuriatingly tepid. A mere disciplinary slap on the wrist for a teacher who had been systematically breaking down young children's spirits. It was unacceptable. The district's lukewarm response only fueled Thomas's resolve. They claimed to have addressed the issue, but he knew better. Mrs. Duncan remained in the classroom, continuing to potentially harm other vulnerable children. The system had failed, not just his daughter, but every child in that classroom. Thomas realized that if no one else would protect these children, he would. The mild-mannered father was transforming, driven by a singular purpose. The school might be content with minimal intervention, but he was not. Something had to be done, and he was prepared to do whatever it took to ensure Mrs. Duncan could never harm another child again. What began as a personal mission to protect his daughter quickly evolved into a crusade for justice. The school's offer to simply transfer his daughter to another class was nothing more than a band-aid on a gaping wound. Thomas understood that the issue was far larger than his own child. It was about the safety and emotional well-being of every child in Mrs. Duncan's classroom. Despite united protests from parents, the school remained frustratingly passive. Undeterred, Thomas turned to the one platform that could amplify their voices: change.org. What started as a local petition soon became a national movement. Within days, over 2,000 signatures demanded Mrs. Duncan's dismissal, transforming Thomas from a concerned father to an unexpected activist. The story spread like wildfire. Local news channels picked up the narrative, and soon national media outlets were broadcasting the details of Mrs. Duncan's classroom cruelty. Thomas found himself at the center of a media storm, his determination resonating with parents across the country who recognized the profound impact of early childhood experiences. More than just seeking punishment, Thomas was fighting to prevent lasting psychological damage. He knew all too well how deeply childhood trauma can embed itself, how a single negative experience can shape a child's self-perception for years, even decades to come. By speaking out, he was potentially saving not just his daughter, but countless other children from similar emotional scarring. The journey was never about revenge. It was about accountability, protection, and the fundamental right of children to feel safe, respected, and valued in their first educational environment. Thomas had become a voice for the voiceless, a guardian for those too young to defend themselves. Parenting is a journey of unexpected challenges, and Thomas's experience with his daughter's classroom ordeal had taught him a profound lesson. Sometimes protecting your children means challenging the systems meant to support them. The fight wasn't just about one teacher's misconduct. It was about preserving the sanctity of childhood, those critical years when young minds are most vulnerable and impressionable. A teacher's role extends far beyond textbooks and curriculum. They are architects of potential, responsible for nurturing imagination, confidence, and emotional well-being. Thomas's crusade against Mrs. Duncan had transformed his family. What began as a desperate attempt to understand his daughter's pain became a powerful testament to parental vigilance. By refusing to remain silent, he had not only protected his own child, but potentially shielded countless others from emotional harm. The experience had changed him. He learned that true parenting isn't about controlling every outcome, but about being present, observant, and willing to act when something feels fundamentally wrong. His daughter was now in a new classroom, but the real victory was in the heightened awareness and connection within their family. Despite the uncertainty of whether systemic changes would occur, Thomas remained hopeful. He and his wife, Lacey, had always prioritized their children's well-being, creating a stable, supportive home environment that could help their kids weather life's challenges. Their daughter, Aliyah, and their other children had proven the power of unconditional parental support. The ordeal had reinforced a crucial truth. Sometimes being a good parent means being willing to go to extraordinary lengths to protect and advocate for your children. Thomas had discovered that his love was his greatest strength, a force capable of challenging institutionalized indifference and creating meaningful change.